took possession, current tenant kicked out, rehabbed it, and then they put a tenant in it and they rented it out for that 3-year term and ended up getting the possession of the property. Right. It worked out for them, but it is a long road.
There's a lot of risk in that. Try to manage the risk the best we can, but in the end, I can't tell them how that judge is going to rule or how that jury is going to rule.
Welcome to the Beyond Wealth podcast. I'm so excited about this episode. Cindy Webb, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Todd. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we recently met and, talking about your background, I was like, as soon as we met, I like almost probably scared you because I was like, I've got a podcast and I need you to come on, and we worked it out really quickly.
Yes.
So I appreciate it. So tell me a little bit about your background. You are a lawyer and you specialize in real estate litigation and do a lot of tax liens, which is probably what we will talk about mostly. But I just kind of want to hear about your background, how you got into law, and kind of made your pathway into these kind of specific niches.
I actually have an undergraduate in business from UAB, and while there I decided to go on to law school, and so I went to Cumberland School of Law, graduated from there in 2002. I'm showing my age, but graduated from Cumberland in 2002. I also obtained a MBA while I was at Stanford. And so we actually started out in personal injury litigation as a defense lawyer.
Okay.
Insurance defense lawyer, did that for a number of years. And then I moved to the firm that I'm with now, which is it's a full service firm. And so we have a variety of practices, which is great. So when someone walks in the door, generally we can help them. When I was doing personal injury work, if it wasn't within my wheelhouse, I was having to refer them to other lawyers. But
right.
And there are some areas of law that we don't handle, but we handle a wide variety of legal issues because we have a number of lawyers in our firm. And so I started working there, and I was a litigator. I specialized in litigation, and we have a closing department that does a lot of closing, but they do not litigate. So as people would call them with litigation issues, they would refer it to me, and it just kind of stuck. And so I've been there.
They roped you in.
Yes, I've been there. I've been there for 11 years, and I've been handling real estate litigation for 11 years, as well as other types of litigation.
That's amazing. And I love at the beginning, you just like, you were so humble about it, but you have your undergrad, you got your MBA in addition to your law degree.
Yes.
Just, no big deal. That's amazing. I don't want to dive too much into the past and history. I want to definitely get to the law side, but talk me through a little bit about that journey of that must have been a season of just a lot of school, a lot of learning, a lot of, did you do any internships through that process? Did you do, how did that kind of show up and push you into the personal injury space?
So I actually wanted to be a business lawyer. I have my business degree, was getting my MBA.
Right.
I wanted to be a corporate lawyer, not a litigator. That was not something I was looking at. But when I was at Cumberland, I started participating in some of the trial competitions because I thought it would be fun, and ended up doing well in the trial competitions and ended up making the trial team. And Cumberland has a very good trial team. They've always had a very good trial team. And so I was a member of the trial team. So when I started interviewing in my third year, the firms that were asking me to come and interview were all litigation firms because I had litigation, trial team.
Trial team experience,
yes.
They're like, get her.
Yes, and I actually, in between college and law school, I worked as a paralegal, and I worked at a litigation firm. And so I knew not only I didn't have just the book knowledge, but I also knew exactly how it looked from a practice standpoint because I had supported other lawyers through that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I used to do, and I'm not equating it to it, but I was on a debate team, and I loved it.
Yes.
And it was so much fun, and I'm assuming that the trial team has some similar, there's guidelines, there's rules, there's counters, and you're basically setting mock trials, right?
That's exactly right.
And there's something about the actual, the reps.
Yes.
That just cannot be replaced. I'm assuming when you went into court for the first time, it didn't feel unnatural because you had so much trial team reps.
That is true.
What's up, everybody? Just want to take a brief moment and thank you so much for listening to the Beyond Wealth podcast. The goal is to just help people understand the market here in Birmingham, understand businesses and different things happening, and really promote the amazing city that we live in. And so thank you for listening. As always, it always helps if you can like and subscribe to the content. It helps get it out to more people. And so I'd love if you could do that. And then lastly, if you need an agent to work with you to help you either buy, to sell, if you're an investor, anything like that, please reach out. I'd love to see if it's a good fit for me to serve you. And so thank you for the time, and check out the rest of the episode. What percentage is actually seen in the courtroom, and is that typically litigators that do go in that vein, or are there other parts of law that also see the courtroom as well? Because I think it's not the majority of what you do, right?
A lot is settled outside the courtroom. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's actually better for the client to settle if you can reach a good settlement. It's better for the client usually, from a financial standpoint, from a stress standpoint, from the risk.
Yeah.
There's always risk because you may know what you think the judge will do, but I don't have a crystal ball. So you never know what, the judge is going to make the decision on their case, or a jury. You may be a jury trial.
Right.
And so there's a lot of risk in that. We try to manage the risk the best we can. We try to help the client know what to expect, but in the end, I can't tell them how that judge is going to rule, or how that jury is going to rule. And so you manage the risk by settling if you can get a good settlement, if it's amicable, and depending on the type of case, whether it's a contingency or whether they're paying you by hour, you've got to look at the financials with that as well.
Right.
Is it worth paying the lawyer to go to trial and to prepare, or not, and then
right.
That type of thing. Plus, there's expenses to litigation. There's court reporter fees and things like that.
Yeah, you may have an investigator. I mean,
Yes.
it really starts to stack on pretty quickly.
It can. So, but yes, I do a lot of litigation. I see the courtroom probably more often than some lawyers, but I'm not saying that settling a case is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. That's
it can
really
be a good thing. It's just knowing your case, being able to I think the best skill for a lawyer is being able to evaluate the case and be able to communicate that to the client, so the client can make informed decisions about whether they want to move forward or not.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into the tax liens and all that, I want to put out a disclaimer for everyone.
Yes.
That even though you are a lawyer, this is not legal advice. That anybody who hears something on this podcast wants to take it and run with it, they still need to go get their own lawyer. They could hire you. This is just a general guideline to better help people understand tax liens. There's been a lot of changes.
Yes.
But this is not legal advice.
That's true. That is true.
Nothing you say is held binding. Let's just say that right off the bat.
Yes.
But let's dig into it. So you do a lot of real estate litigation, and then what you do is also help with some of your clients doing tax liens and all that. So I want you to kind of describe for me the landscape of what used to be.
Okay.
What is now the new rules, and then we were talking about how, offline we were talking about how different counties actually adhere to these different rule sets still. So it's not as default to everything's new or everything is old. It's you have to consult someone who knows what they're doing. But talk to me about the old way, the new way, and then we'll kind of go from there.
In 2018, the legislature...
They kind of changed it up,
They
right?
did. So what they did was they enacted a law that allows the tax collectors of each county to adopt a new method for auctioning off and handling tax delinquent properties.
Okay.
And so the thing with that is each county has the right to adopt that new scheme. So, but some counties, they don't have to. It's not binding on every county. So under the old law, the law was the law. Every county had to abide by the specific procedure, and then the redemptions process were all the same. across the counties in Alabama. And one thing you've got to know too is what Alabama does with their tax lien laws and tax certificate laws are very different from other counties. So this is not going to be if you're an investor in Georgia, it's going to be different than Alabama. Mississippi's going to be different, and so you have to be very careful about what you're looking at online, and who you're listening to on YouTube and those type of things, because these types of laws are very state specific. And then even within the state of Alabama, now we have this new legislature where the counties can adopt a new system, and so you need to look at your county that you're investing in and see what system they're under. Now, if you're an investor going to sell it the first time, you're going to know which system you're under, because the new system allows for an auctioning off on like an online auction, where the old system you actually go down to the courthouse and you bid.
Okay.
So if you're investing for the first time, you're going to know which system that you're under when you purchase the tax interest. But if you're purchasing from another investor, say for instance you're purchasing their interest, they're assigning the lien to you, you need to look at what county that property's in and whether at the time of the purchase of that tax interest the county had adopted the new system, or if they were still under the old system, because that's going to control the redemption rights moving forward.
So at the time of purchase, everything's grandfathered in if you were under the old system.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
I actually didn't. I mean, it makes sense because I know you can buy debt, and I know you can assign properties, you can assign contracts. I didn't think about it, but it makes sense that you can buy a tax lien interest. You're not actually buying the property, you're buying the interest that they already purchased and you purchased. Let's step back just a little bit. Explain to me, for someone who does not know even what a tax lien is, real quick. Give like a 30,000 foot view, real quick excerpt of what a tax lien is and why that's in place and why the state has the right to effectively sell that home or sell that tax interest.
Well, as you know, you will receive a tax bill if you own property in
every year.
Yeah, every year. Now there are some exemptions that you can get if you're elderly and below certain income and things like this. You have a homestead exemption, which will lower, if you're living in the home, it will lower your tax liability on that property.
And you're only allowed one of those, right? For
yes,
your primary.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Your primary residence. But when you purchase a tax, so the purposes of the taxes is obviously to fund the county to be able to do the things that the county needs to do. And so if you have delinquent taxes, you have homeowners who have not paid their taxes, that's going to deplete some of the funds for the county to be able to use. And so they have the right to auction off that lien for someone else to pay the taxes so that they can put that into their budget. But what happens is the owner has a right to redeem that and to pay that back. But the way that it's done is different depending on whether you're under the old law or the new law. And tax liens usually have first priority over other liens as far as being paid and so forth.
So when that tax lien, you purchase the tax lien, and effectively then under the old law you had rights to it, which we'll get into to do certain things. In new law you don't have as much rights, or they're different. But then there are other liens, like there could be mechanical liens, there could be a sewer lien, there could be debt from a bank on that.
Yes, that's correct.
And all of those also get filed in line. So if you say the bidding went up to, the tax lien could be $5,000, but the property could get bid up to $50,000, right? And so then are you purchasing that, or is that a different like bidding system, and you're only paying that $5,000 lien, and then everything else falls off, or how does that all work?
So under the old law, you could put in an excess bid. So for instance, the taxes were $5,000. You could pay the taxes. You'll also pay some fees associated with the delinquency of that debt. And then the investors could also put in an excess bid.
Okay.
And so under the old law, you would bid on the property based on the excess. Like you would, it's hard to explain. You would bid on the property by you could add an excess to the bid.
Okay.
In order to get the property, because the interest rate is going to be statutory.
Okay.
Used to be 12%, now it's 8%.
Oh.
But the investor is going to get 8% interest on their investment.
Right.
But say you have two bidders bidding on the same piece of property, you can put in an excess bid in order to get the property.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay? And so, but there's only a certain amount of that's going to accrue that 8% interest.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
So for instance, if you bid $10,000 over, there's only going to be like a certain amount of that's going to accrue interest.
The
Does that
rest
make
is
sense?
just won't accrue interest during the time if it gets redeemed.
If it's over a certain amount.
Right. Okay.
You have up to a certain amount that will accrue interest on the excess, and then after that, you don't receive any interest, but you do secure the property against other bidders.
Right.
By bidding the excess, if
Gotcha.
that makes sense.
Yeah, you retain the lien by going out over.
Right.
Yeah. So talk about the old system and kind of how it worked first, and then we'll kind of talk about the new system.
Okay. Under the old system, you would actually go down to the courthouse and you would bid on the property. And like I said, you're going to get, now the law is 8% interest on your money. And then you had the original owner or anyone who had rights in the property, such as a mortgage company and so forth, has 3 years under an administrative redemption process to redeem that property. So they would come down to the courthouse and they would just pay the amount of money in order to redeem. Under the old law, the tax lien purchaser has the right to possession of the property immediately. Now, that's where you definitely need to go see a lawyer, because if the original owner is in the property or the original owner is leasing the property, you can't just come in to the property. You can't change the locks and lock them out of their home. I mean, you're going to have to file an ejectment action to eject them from the property. If the property is empty, that's what's called scrambling possession. And so that is often considered still in the owner's possession.
Interesting.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So you kind of have to look at that. If it's empty, the tax lien holder can set up adverse possession of the property in order to shorten the redemption time for the original owner.
Okay.
And so anyway, so that's something that you have to kind of look at is the property occupied? Is it not occupied?
Right. So I have several friends that are investors, and they did some tax lien stuff, and effectively they bid on the lien. They got it. I think they did have to kick out the current tenant because the current tenant wasn't paying. The landlord was over it and just stopped paying all their fees. Took possession, got the current tenant kicked out, rehabbed it, which we can talk about those payments. What happens? You get paid back some of that, and some you don't. And
That's
then, and then they put a tenant in it and they rented it out for that 3-year term, and ended up after that filing and getting the possession of the property. Right. It worked out for them, but it is a long road. And
That's
I think
correct.
The whole tax lien thing, the misnomer is it's cheap properties and it's super easy and you just bid and all that. And yes, there are some good things about it, but it is not an easy pathway.
It's not an easy
Evictions are
path.
not easy. Rehabs are not easy. Typically, these properties are torn up. And then all of that could happen and someone could still redeem it. So for that period of time, you can, get it taken. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, on the tax lien, if I took possession of a property, we'll say it's beat up, needs to be fixed up to put a new tenant in it. This is old law. So a lot of this will not apply. But in that case, if I were to put a $10,000 chandelier in the house and be like, oh, I upgrade this property, that's not going to count because that's frivolous, basically.
It's not a preservation improvement.
Correct, yeah. But if
So
it needed a new roof, the roof would it be included, basically, because it keeps the property whole?
It could be. The judge would make that determination.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
where it gets tricky. So what we were seeing under the old law is you would have investors come in, and as I said, under the old law, the investor has the right of possession immediately
Right.
upon purchase. The problem is they can't just, if someone's in there, they're still going to have to go through the correct legal process to evict. But we were seeing investors come in and they would start renovating the property in order to make it difficult for the original owner to redeem. Because the original owner still has to pay for preservation improvements.
Gotcha.
But what does that look like? And that's the question. That's the question that the judge decides is what that looks like. But I would think that a $10,000 chandelier would not be
Jessica's saying no way.
would be considered a preservation improvement, and so that's the problem that the investor has.
Yeah.
But a roof that is leaking and causing damage, I would think that a judge would more likely find that is a preservation improvement and that repair needed to be done in order to preserve the property. And so those are the things that you've got to look at is what is the manner of use of the property when it was purchased.
Right.
Is it a house that's being rented out, and does it need to remain, habitable for the tenant, that type of thing. But that's what the judge has to decide.
Yeah.
If the parties cannot agree what's preservation improvements and what is not preservation improvements in order for the original owner to redeem, then the judge decides what that is.
That's interesting. So I didn't know that a judge, so it's subjective per a judge, but before it even gets to that place, say I go in, retain the property, the owners comes back and say, I actually came into some money, I can go ahead and buy the property. I'm like, okay, great. I painted the walls and because they were all beat up, and I put a new roof on, and so in addition to the lien, I've got $15,000 into it. And they're like, okay, I agree to that. I don't disagree that those aren't improvements. I'll go ahead and pay it all. They could do that, right?
They could.
And it doesn't go to a judge. It just happens.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So there's the first 3 years is called an administrative redemption process. So the original owner would go down to the tax, to the tax office, and they could pay the delinquent taxes and the fees and things, and they would send a letter to the investor to find out if there's any preservation improvements.
Right.
And there's an affidavit I know that Jefferson County would use where the original owner would say they've contacted the tax lien purchaser to find out if there's any preservation improvements. And then they have a particular time frame with which to respond. If they don't respond, then the investor loses the right to claim those improvements.
Okay, and it's just the lien then.
And then after a certain period of time, I know in Jefferson County there's an actual affidavit process. There's an affidavit that's sent out, and where the owner will fill out that I've sent the letter, they did not respond within the time frame, and they sign it, and then the tax office will let them go ahead and redeem by just paying the taxes and the interest.
Oh, okay.
If the tax lien holder, tax purchaser sends, the amount, the redemption amount to the owner, and it says, I've had to repair the roof, and I've had to fix the gutter, and here's the so insurance is also recoverable. So if the investor insures the property, and here's what I've paid in premiums, and they list that out, then that's something that the original owner would have to pay to redeem the property.
Right.
Now, there is a referee process. If there's a disagreement, that they go through this referee process before they actually file in court.
It's interesting, and I want to get to the new, because obviously that changes a lot of these, what we're currently talking about. But it's good to understand the old so we know where it goes to the new. But there's so many nuances to it. That's
Yes.
why we say at the beginning of this episode,
Yes.
please consult a lawyer personally, because your situation could have, you could generally know, like, this is a good decision to do or not. But your case, there could be a better pathway if you consulted someone like you on your specific case, because there's
Yes.
nuances to it. And there's a lot that I'm learning even in this episode, which is great. My two interactions directly with tax liens. So one was recently, I had a sale of a property for someone I knew, and he was moving, and in the course, he owned the property outright. He had paid off his mortgage a while ago. And for those of you who don't know, mortgages often pay, if you have a mortgage, they have this escrow, and the escrow pays insurance, and it also pays for your taxes. And they pull all that together because the mortgage company wants to make sure that those are paid, typically. Right. But as soon as you pay off your property, or if you have a commercial loan, those taxes and that insurance are your responsibility. And you can actually opt out of escrow on a mortgage.
That's correct, yes.
People typically don't, because it's just easier to pay one payment instead of three. So all that to say is, because he owned the property, and in the midst of moving, he just missed the notice. Mm-hmm. So we come 6 months later to sell his property. We get it under contract. Everything's rolling. And all of a sudden, we had missed the deadline for it, and it had gone into redemption. And so we had to push closing by like 3 weeks, because we had to let it finalize in redemption, and then we had to request to get it back out and pay off the liens and all that.
Which would have been done through the administrative process.
Right.
So he went down to the courthouse and probably paid that.
Yeah, I think the lawyers ended up being able to get just the letter, and then we paid it at closing. So
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yep.
But I know that it had started the process. That we were like a couple weeks off, and it had already been sent off, and they're like, nope, you got to wait another month till we relook at everything.
Okay. Had it been sold? That's the question.
That's what I'm not sure. It was 6
it,
months out from when it was due.
Okay, because it can be bid in by the state, and the state of Alabama could hold.
Yeah.
Could hold that.
All I know is we had to wait 3 weeks. So
Okay.
that was one. And then the second case was interesting. So one of my very first real estate deals, when I was going to this, really kind of diving into it, after I had one property and kind of did nothing with real estate. And then I was like, I'm going to start investing. And so I'm kind of turning up a bunch of rocks, trying to figure life out, trying to figure out investing. And I come across this Facebook ad for basically a 32-door property, multifamily, for, I think it was $40,000. And I was like, okay, what's that? And so long story short, call the person. Well, they were selling, theoretically, the rights to this tax lien. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, they didn't even have it. And then I learned about tax liens. I talked to someone. I kind of navigated and figured out that basically they either were in line, or they thought they were in line, or could get rights to it somehow. But you can go and sign up to be, at the time, I don't know if the new rules are different, but you could go to sign up. And so basically it was like they were down to like the third person, and I was like 100. I went and signed up just to see, and I was like 103. Like, it was just no way that tax lien would have ever gotten to me as an option to buy it.
Okay, from the state.
From the state, I think. Yeah. So long story short, I just start to dig into it and just trying to figure out, and then I drive by the property, and there was a name of the company who used to rent it there. And I was like, okay, so I researched that. So I ended up finding the original owner, and her family had owned it, and now she owned it. And she had sold it off to some guys who failed to pay her because she had done a seller finance, and they failed to pay the taxes. And I think, I could be wrong, one of the burnt buildings was burnt, and I think they intentionally burned it down to try to get insurance money, and it didn't work out. They were in litigation with it. So we ended up, with some partners, we ended up buying her debt from her, and then we had rights to basically as
Redeem. Ownership,
and then we went to the people who did have the tax lien, and we redeemed the tax lien.
Okay.
And so it was a really, for my first deal in real estate, it was very interesting. It took about 6 or 7 months to work through that, and I ended up hiring some lawyers, and we ended up doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure from the owners who had it, but we basically owned the debt. And we had the tax lien paid off. So we paid off the tax lien. We owned the debt. We basically had full rights to the property, but we didn't actually have the property. The people who had ownership, they had purchased it. They still had the deed.
Okay.
So we basically said, hey, we're going to foreclose on you, or you give us the property.
Yes.
And that was a really sweet moment because I had contacted them early on in the process, and he had wanted like 120 or 130K, and I said, take a hike, buddy. And I bought the debt for $60,000. Yeah. And then between tax lien and lawyer fees, put another 20 into it. And so we retained possession of that property for 80 grand.
That's amazing. It's fun. It can be really fun, and it can be fun.
It was.
And I've told many people I'm such a nerd because I enjoy looking at title searches and then trying to figure out how to clear up the title.
Right.
And I know I know most people don't enjoy that.
Don't enjoy title searches.
So I know that is I've said I'm a law nerd. I'm a nerd for enjoying this, but I do enjoy it. I love clearing up title. I love being able to fix the title. I do quiet title actions as well, and so that's fun for me.
Yeah.
But it is neat. You can make good money. I'm not saying you can make good money. I think what bothers me is I see so many people jump in and spend a lot of money and not realizing that there might be problems with this process. You know, you have to understand your risks, and you need to try to manage those as best you can, with title searches if you can, before you put any money into it. I would definitely perform a title search on the property, go talk to a lawyer, those type things. I've done a lot of redemptions outside of litigation just by, contacting the original owner or getting them to convey some interest, their interest in it, and that type of thing. You can, there's ways to do it. You just need to know where in the process that tax interest is. You need to know whether you're under the old law or the new law.
Right.
You need to know, are there other liens on the property? So if you invest in a tax interest, you're taking that subject to any other liens.
Yeah.
So if there's a mortgage on the property for $50,000, I mean, if you don't pay that, it's going to get foreclosed upon.
Right.
And so now your tax interest may be paid at foreclosure, that type of thing, but you're not getting that, you're taking it subject to the property, to any other liens that are on it. There's a judgment creditor, IRS lien, you're taking that subject to those liens. Yeah. And so I'm not sure that every investor understands that if there's a lien on this property that I'm bidding on, there's stuff attached to a property, and to get it clear and free is not an easy pathway. I think in the situation with the multifamily, I lucked out because the property itself had so much value. It was worth the journey. I don't think that would have been worth it on a single family home. Right. At all. But the value, I think we ended up selling it for 3-4x what we had into it. So it was a great deal. We were planning on rehabbing it
But we had people who just wanted it, and
Okay.
we were like, well,
Sure.
we'll make. We set a price,
Yes.
and they came up. But
It's
all that to
fabulous.
say is, it is an interesting pathway, but it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of knowing the right properties to do. It's not just like everyone makes
right.
sense. So
And that's typically when you have a tax redemption situation, that's typically what you run into. You have to look at the business decision related to that, because you have possibly an original owner who's strapped for funds. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the situation
Right.
that they were in.
Yeah.
So being able to pay a lawyer and pay preservation improvements and those type of things may be difficult. Then you've got the investor that, is this property worth all the time and money to go through this process?
Yeah.
So that's something that has to be considered as well. So that's why you need to know what it's going to take.
Yeah, what you're getting into. All right, so we kind of talked about the old law. There's a lot of, you can sort of take immediate action and occupy it with some caveats. What is the new law? We know 8%. It's 4% less than 12, so that's already not as...
No, the 8% is under the old law. It changed.
Oh.
It used to be 12% years ago, and
Okay.
then it changed to 8%.
Okay, so it's 8%.
So that's still under the old law.
So 8%,
That's one of the
okay.
biggest difference between the old law and the new law. The new law, you don't bid in excess. There's no right to bid in excess.
Oh,
You bid the interest rate.
okay.
So you can bid from 12, the cap being 12 down to 0%.
Interesting. So
Under the new law.
explain that to me, because
Well-
I'm not... I'm like, oh yeah. No, I don't understand.
So under the new law, if the county that you're investing in is under the new law, then you would have an online bidding system. And the properties come up and it starts at 12%. That's the max that you can bid as far as the interest rate. And then you bid down the interest rate. So the winning bid is going to be the lowest interest rate. So that actually helps the original owner. If the original owner wants to redeem, they're redeeming at a lower interest rate. But the reason the investor would want to do that is they're hoping that the original owner never redeems, and that they can that they'll end up with the property.
Right.
And so they might be willing to bid down to zero. They might be willing to put their money into it, and it possibly being redeemed at 0%, just with the hopes that they might be able to end up with owning that property and it not being redeemed in
And
the long run.
this is a significant change, because my understanding before, and especially when it was 12%, there's a lot of people going in and buying a ton of liens, because worst case scenario,
They're getting 12%.
they're getting 12% on
That's
their money.
correct.
So I'm going to go ahead and put $5,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is on these tax liens, and either I get the property or I get 12%. It's a win-win. But this new one is like, no, we're not giving the investor as much leverage. This is a little bit more towards the owner's advantage. So now the investor has to be aggressive and bid down and potentially be at zero if they really want that lien.
That's correct.
That's interesting. It's probably better.
It's better for the original owners.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you're not out in the rain at the court steps. You're doing it online with a click.
Yes, that's a little more
nicer.
keeping up with the times.
Yeah.
Also, I do think it's going to cut down on all this ambiguity as far as preservation improvements and those type things, because under the new sales scheme, the purchaser doesn't have the automatic right to possession, so they can't come in and start making improvements. They have to wait.
How long is that period?
3 years.
Okay. So effectively, you are potentially bidding down, we'll say, to 4%. You get the lien, and then you have to wait 3 years before you even touch that property.
That's correct.
See, that's wild, because, like, what if the roof was shot? Because I'm thinking of, like, some of these properties where there's reasons why they haven't paid. There's a tarp on the roof. And then if you can't touch it now maybe there's some way where you could secure the property, or is there no law? Like, you literally can't be on the premise at all to secure your property that you have a interest in. Is there any caveat to say, like, if the roof, because water is the biggest like issue with houses. If water gets inside the house, you're talking about mold, you're talking about deteriorating wood, like thousands. You could turn, as long as you have a good roof, for the most part, utilities shut off, like a house can kind of sit. Like it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be relatively okay. But if you don't have a good roof and maybe a busted pipe, like you are up a river.
Yeah.
So what is the law there to secure your property?
Well, I mean, the question too is someone living there? I mean, you can't just walk
if no
on
one
to
was living there.
I mean, because you don't have ownership. You just have a lien.
Right.
You have it. It's definitely under the new. I've always called it a tax lien, even under the original scheme, just because people think I own it outright, and it's not really. You don't really own it outright, although you do have the right to possession under the law. But the new scheme definitely calls it a lien because it is a lien. The original owners still have ownership. They still have the right of possession, and you would actually end up foreclosing the lien and quieting title at the end of the day. And so the term lien is used more under the new scheme. So so you just have a lien, almost like a mortgage company. I mean, you're going to have a lien on that property.
So you're taking the same risk a mortgage company does, that the owner doesn't keep up with the property.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, I don't per se disagree with it, but it definitely changes your strategy.
Yes.
So then you can't take possession, so there's no like kicking someone out and renting it for that 3 years to gain some of your money back. There's no improvements during that time. So at 3 years, what happens?
At 3 years, you send them a notice that you plan to foreclose on the lien, and they have 30 days to pay you to redeem.
Okay.
And so they can, and if they pay you within the 30 days, you don't have a right to attorney fees. But if you have to file a litigation to foreclose the lien, then you can actually recoup your attorney fees for doing that.
So you file, they don't pay, you go through the process, you then can take possession, but then it's truly yours. It's almost like just taking that 3-year period out. Am I understanding that correctly? Of semi-possession, if that makes sense. We'll call it that. I know that's not a technical lawyer.
It's called administrative redemption process under the old law. The first 3 years where you can, but you have the right to possession. Yes, and so it kind of takes out that ambiguity as to possession. Possession's huge when it comes to redemption law because an owner in possession under the old law always has the right to redeem. Always.
Yeah, even past that 3 years.
Even past the 3 years, even past the 6 years. And when I say 6 years, what we're talking about is what they call the short statute of limitations. And so it's where, the investor can set up adverse possession, and it shortens the redemption process.
Right.
And then they would file and tell the court, hey, I've been in possession of this property, and therefore, I have the right to, it basically shortens the owner's redemption time.
Gotcha.
Through an adverse possession process,
Gotcha.
Essentially. And so you have all that ambiguity is now gone with the new law because they don't have the right to possession. They can't come in and start making improvements, and so you're not fighting over, is this preservation improvement? Was this something like a $10,000 chandelier that you just put in to try to keep me from being able to, and I'm talking from the original owner's point of view, to keep me from being able to redeem because I can't afford
a $10,000 chandelier.
A $10,000 and the tax,
But it's in Mountain Brook. It was needed, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so it takes that away.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be a clearer process.
And more owner, it leans more towards the owner, owner friendly, and it makes it a little less advantageous for investors to just kind of, I use the term kind of loosely, but kind of pray and spray. Just kind of like throw it out there, like, we'll buy these 20 properties and it's all going to work out because I'm at least getting 12%, and we'll improve these 3 right here because, I'm going to get the money back anyway, and rent them out. And it's like, I don't know of a ton of people who are doing that only as their strategy, but there were several that I do know, investors, that was a part of their pathway. And it works, and if you're willing to go through it, but it still was very much made it hard for the original owner to get back into their property. And there are some people who just land on hard times, unfortunately can't pay some of their bills, and then they can get back to it,
A lot of times it's the scenarios that you talked about before. They've paid off their mortgage. They didn't think about paying the tax bill. Somehow they missed it. I had one time where a woman had a parcel in the tax office. It was split into 2 tax parcels. She paid one, did not realize didn't realize it was on 2 separate, so it went into tax sale, and so she did not realize that. So
and was there a building on both? Basically, the
building was on both. Yes. So
wow.
we have issues like that. Yes. So you have all kinds of scenarios where people do not realize that the property has gone to a tax sale. They should be getting notices, but there maybe there's an address issue or something like that. Maybe one spouse received it, chunked it in the mail, didn't realize what it was, or they thought it was junk mail and they didn't pay it. There's things like that, but there can be there's people who pass away in the estate. The personal representative doesn't pay it for some reason. They don't realize that it's owed. Things like that. So usually when it's in the administrative redemption process, you're going to see more redemptions than when it gets, the older that it gets, I think the less likely that it's going to redeem.
Yeah.
And then you have the scenario too, has an investor made improvements, preservation improvements, you're going to see more redemptions, obviously when they've not done that.
Right.
But when they've made the preservation improvements, that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, and like we talked about, the new law will effectively eliminate that because you can't go in.
That's right.
You can't fix it.
That's right.
So I almost wonder if there was just so much litigation, so much time being, I don't want to say wasted, but the judges having to get involved. They're like, hey, let's do away with this. This is not benefiting the system, and it's not helping ultimately the owners. So it'll be, I think, a lot cleaner and a lot less litigation, which will be good. So it's a very interesting. I feel like we could sit here and talk for hours on this. Yeah. It's like, and that's kind of why we said the disclaimer at the beginning, because every scenario is going to have a different case. And I do think tax liens could still be an investment strategy.
Yes.
But it has definitely become less advantageous in the short term because of the percentage.
Well, but you actually can quiet title sooner as well, and without as many issues. I think it's going to be easier for the investor as far as the quiet title process.
Gotcha.
And wrapping it up sooner.
Okay.
But I think it's not as advantageous as far as coming in and being able to rent the property during those 3 years, because under the old law the tax purchaser has the right to rent. Because they have the right to possession, they have the right to any rent. So let's say an original owner is renting the property to someone else, they have the right to rent, and they would still have to evict, if that makes sense. Right. Still have to eject, because in my opinion, so I've seen scenarios where the investor would come in and try to get the tenant to sign a lease with them. Right. But in my opinion, if the original owner put that tenant in, that original owner is in possession through their tenant, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so in my opinion, that would be a case where the tax purchaser still needs to file an ejectment action of the tenant and the original owner. In order to gain that adverse to possess, to be able to say they've adversely possessed it for 3 continuous years. And so you were seeing where I also had scenarios where they would come in and contact my client's tenant and say, you know, you don't pay the rent to them, you pay the rent to me. And in my opinion, that's a interference with business relations. That's an interference with business contract. And so the proper way to do that would be able to send them a notice saying that they need to you know, they're being ejected from the property, and then
it puts the tenant in a really tough spot because they're like, who do I trust? Yes. And then in addition to it, we'll say the tenant in that situation, the tenant's paying. Right. They're like, I have a lease.
Right.
I'm paying my rent.
Right.
And out of the blue, so scenario A, you're asking me to pay you now because of this little tax lien thing. Who do I trust? I don't have money for a lawyer to figure out where my money should go or should not. And then B, situation where you're saying technically they should evict that. Well, then out of the blue, I have a lease, I'm paying my rent, and I'm getting evicted. That's wild. That really messes up the tenant because they didn't do anything wrong.
Well,
you know?
Normally what I would recommend a negotiation of the lease.
Right.
Because the original, I mean, the tax lien purchaser, the tax purchaser has the right to the rent.
So they could negotiate a new lease?
I think they should do it by agreement.
Yeah.
I don't think they have the right without filing an ejectment action. But during that process of the ejectment action, the court could approve.
Yeah, and that's why you need to go to you.
That's right.
It gets really
I think
really
the issue is.
Well, you.
Go
ahead.
The tax interest, the purchaser of the tax interest does not have the right to interfere with the contract of the original owner and the tenant. Right. So for them to on their own go to the tenant and say, don't pay them, pay me, I think there's a real problem there.
Yeah, you're putting yourself liable.
Right. What they could do is file an ejectment action, and then the original owner and the tax purchaser can work some type of agreement where, you know, as far as the payment of the rent.
Right.
Or the court could, do something like that. But you still have to have an ejectment. Otherwise, the original owner is still in possession through their tenant.
Yeah.
You never have. Sense. Yeah.
It will be. There's so many complicated scenarios that the new system will make a lot more sense. It now that I've kind of
and I may have other lawyers that disagree with me, but I would if I was opposing that, I would definitely file for interference with contractual.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I've always, as I sell different properties, there's been a few situations where I have a tenant-occupied property because I do a lot of stuff with investments as well as some residential for owner-occupants. But in that, they say, "Oh, I just want the house," and so they're like, "Well, I could buy it with the tenant and inject, once the lease is over." Or they'll say, like, "I'll buy the house and just kick the tenant out," and I'm like, "No, that's a contract that you then take over." If you buy that property, the contract stays in place, and you cannot evict them as long as they're paying. You, as the new owner, can gain those rents, but the contract of that lease is attached to the property. They have rights to that property.
That's right.
And so you just became a landlord if you buy this, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." So I've never seen one of those deals go through, but it is such an interesting thing. People just don't think that I bought the property
lease, so it just trumps everything else.
Everything
so there's
else.
no other legal rights attached to this.
Yeah, and it's like, no, the lease is in place. It's a contract, and it's attached their rights to that property for that term, and your ownership of it does not supersede that. And that's the same thing when we go into, we talk about tax liens and we talk about mortgages. There's an order to those, and there's rights to those, and that's why titles get pulled, and that's why it's going back to hire a great lawyer, hire a great realtor. These are very, very complex, big decisions that you're making, either as investments or even as your personal home. And it's best to make sure that you're covered in all the nuances of all those things. But this has been amazing. I always like this question. I don't want to put you on the spot. But I think it's a very helpful because we've covered a lot, but I don't know if I've covered everything. Is there a question that I should have asked that I did not ask? Or do you feel like we covered the maybe not 30,000 foot view, but 10,000 foot view of taxes? We kind of dug into a few nitty gritty details. Is there anything we didn't touch? on this?
I don't know. There's probably a lot we did not touch on this. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway from the talk is that tax lien investment is more complicated than you may first realize, especially if you're reading something online or you're looking at something on YouTube. I go back to states are different.
Yeah.
Now, even in the state of Alabama, different counties are going to be different. You need to know whether you're under the old law or the new law. Possession, whether, the property, someone's in possession of the property, not in possession, is going to be important. There's just a lot of things to think about, and there's been a lot of changes in the tax law in Alabama, probably since 2018. You had the changing in the interest rate, and then we had a case that came out in 2018 that kind of changed when you've got to file an ejectment action. You can actually, if an investor doesn't file the ejectment action and they just let the original owner remain in possession, then that puts them at risk. There's just been a lot of changes. It's even hard, to keep up with as a lawyer, having all the new case law that comes out, and then the statutes and things like that. And so, but do know that we're under a new, the tax collectors have a right to adopt the new system, and the new system is going to change drastically how it was previously handled, and things like that. So you do need to just know, just be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
Be careful who you listen to.
Get personal advice from a lawyer.
Yes, get personal advice from a lawyer. Yes.
No, I think that's the biggest takeaway. So, all that to say, this has been an amazing conversation. If people do want to get that advice and get it from you, how do they get a hold of you to help them with tax liens or any real estate, maybe litigation questions?
Okay. Well, they can call the firm and ask for me. It's Massey, Stoetzer, and Nichols is the firm that I work for. The telephone number is 205-838-9000. Or they can email me at CWebb. It's my first initial and my last name, WEBB, at msnattorneys.com. They can look us, we're on the website, so they can look us up. We're on Facebook, Massey, Stoetzer, and Nichols.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And I'll also link y'all in the bio as well. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. I have personally hired lawyers, and if I hired you to be on this podcast would be the most expensive podcast I've ever had. Your time is very valuable, and beyond just your hourly rate that you charge people to give your wealth of knowledge, you're just an amazing human being, and I thank you so much for this knowledge and time helping others.
Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's awesome. I hope you have a great week.
Okay, you too. Thank you.